This program, while curated to help you improve your health, contains general advice and should not replace the individual advice of your medical practitioner.
And so I realized that I had to really get to the root cause of why people weren't having sex and then show them what's really possible. I would say 10% of the pleasure that a woman has available to her is in the clitoris, and 90% of it is in the vagina. Your vagina and your orgasms are a barometer. If your vagina is not wet, let's ask why. Does sex leave you feeling rejuvenated, ecstatic, transformed, and like it changed your life? And if not, then you're doing it wrong.
In life, it's normal to have ups and downs. But what do we do when we get stuck? I've always been fascinated by the healing journey. Why do some people get better while others fail to make the shift? Welcome to the Season 2 Expert Series, where you'll meet 24 of the world's leaders in health discussing their passions and what it takes to make a shift.
We tend to be our harshest critics.
We are more than the muscle and bones in our body.
Whoa, that's so opposite of what I was taught growing up.
I would like a call to arms for women to know that their intuition isn't lying to them.
I'm Katherine Maslin, and this is The Shift. Hi, I'm Katherine Maslin, naturopath, author, and host of The Shift. In the Expert Series, we share the insight, stories, and expertise of each of our amazing experts. We're talking doctors, authors, naturopaths, researchers, and thought leaders. You may have heard them on Season 2 of The Shift, where we took snippets of these interviews to put them together in the series for you. If you haven't listened to Season 2 yet, I'd highly recommend checking out Episode 1, which will give you an overview of what constitutes women's hormonal health and a sneak peek into the series. We'll provide a link in the show notes. Kim Anami is a holistic sex and relationship coach, writer, and speaker. Her work is a spiritual synthesis of over 2 decades of Tantra, Taoism, Osho, transpersonal psychology, philosophy, and a host of quantum growth accelerating practices. She uses these to propel clients into higher stratospheres of connection, intimacy, energy, and creativity. Kim's advice on sex, life, and love have graced Playboy, Elle, Oprah, Marie Claire, and Shape magazines, the Daily Mail, GQ, and national talk shows from the E! Network to CNN and NPR. Kim is a vaginal weightlifter and a trailblazer when it comes to pushing the limits of what is possible for our sexuality and sexual health. This conversation is super juicy and edgy, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Kim Anami, thank you so much for joining me for Season 2 of The Shift. I've been following your work for a really long time, and I'm really curious to get in and ask you some of these deep and juicy questions. But before we get started, tell me, who is Kim Anami? I want to know the story that led you to be where you are today.
Well, I have one of the most strong vaginas in the world. That's who I am. Well, I'm a sex and relationship expert, vaginal weightlifter, surfer, and I guess you could say that I really pioneered this genre of holistic sexual health. Before I came along, no one was doing that. You had doctors, and then you had kind of giggly cosmopolitan articles and nothing really in between, especially from a holistic perspective. So for me, I was aware of my sexuality from a young age, and as this energy source, and intuitively felt that it was this way to transform myself or gain awareness. And then my early sexual experiences really reinforced that, where things opened up, this portal opened up into another dimension. And I found parts of myself that seemed like they'd been superimposed upon me culturally, society-wise, in terms of conditioning and programming, just fall away. And a more pure, true version of myself emerged. Like that sex actually became this tool for self-actualization. And so that's been a huge, so yes, it's great. And there's lots of pleasure and orgasms, but there was a much deeper, more profound element to sex that was always my guiding force in my sexual explorations.
So tell me, what was the moment where that light bulb switched on in your head and you went, hold on, there's actually something really profound here? Can you remember when that happened?
Well, I think intuitively, I just always felt my sexual energy as this kind of driving force inside of me. And for whatever reason, I didn't have that squelched out of me as most people do. And then I had my first cervical orgasm in my teens. And that was the first orgasm I ever had. And that was a completely life-changing, life-altering, transcendent, as though you've taken the most incredible psychoactive drugs type of experience, except it's all free and it's all inside of you. And so that was probably a major shift for me in realizing, whoa, this, what I kind of couldn't articulate, put into words or had no framework for, certainly within the culture at large, in that experience, and then in subsequent experiences, kept being reinforced as this is a completely different thing that we're being told, right? Like the dominant paradigm is full of taboo and shame and don't talk about it. And then at the same time in my life, I was exploring things like meditation and different elements of spirituality, conscious dreaming. And so this really fit in that paradigm of spiritual growth and development and reaching higher states of consciousness. And then that was also very interesting to me because I saw that, so is this a very deliberate distortion of what sex really is to keep people from their power?
So one of the things you said was that, this concept around sexuality being so taboo, right? It's something that we're all born to do. It's something that's so natural. But why is there so much emotion and culture and, I guess, negativity built around this area of our lives?
After being in this realm now for 3 decades, I would say that it's actually deliberate as a control tool for populations. And because, look, in ancient cultures and Tantra culture in India and Taoist studies and medicine in ancient China, so around 5,000 years ago in both of those countries, sex was medicine. In ancient China, you would go to see your physician, and this was around the time that they were pioneering their systems in herbal medicine, acupuncture, acupressure, mapping out the meridians in the body. And they also looked at sex as medicine. So you might go to your Taoist physician and they would do a tongue diagnosis and a pulse reading and say, okay, you've got deficient kidney energy. So to really boost up that kidney energy, we want you to have sex in reverse cowgirl position for the next 30 days. Take these herbs, do this acupuncture, because that position will direct healing energy towards the kidneys. So in these cultures, sex didn't have shame or taboo or judgment around it. It was a revitalization tool. It was used for healing and to access and consciously cultivate our creative energy, to really tune into the life force energy of the universe. And so my view is that, look, what's a very, we're living in an era right now where all kinds of things we're seeing come to the surface that have been suppressed. All kinds of information is coming up that's actually being revealed. And I think this is one of those things where there's been a deliberate attempt to censor people and distort the true power of their sexual energy, because I believe this is one of the most creative healing powers that we have. And in some of these cultures, they used sex as a springboard to spiritual states, right? That you could use this energy to help boost and turbocharge you into higher states of consciousness and awareness. So if you were, let's say, a not so benevolent leader of a country or a populace, and one of the fastest ways to disempower people would be to cut people off from their sexuality.
Tell me more about this sex as medicine stuff. What does it do in our bodies, in our physiology, in our spirituality?
Well, it's huge. And I often say that when people are not having sex or the right kind of sex, and I say right with air quotes, as in there's a kind of sex that gives you energy and a kind of sex that takes away energy, right? My big barometric question is, does sex leave you feeling rejuvenated, ecstatic, transformed, and like it changed your life? And if not, then you're doing it wrong. And that's not a judgment so much as to say that sex can be this incredible tool for revitalization and rejuvenation, or it's a drain on your energy system. And most of the ways that people learn about sex in modern day culture via porn and this casual kind of whatever, no big deal type environment versus really acknowledging the power that it has, this is again a misuse or distortion of its true potential. Sex is the best acupressure treatment that you could have. The yoni and the lingam each have reflexology zones mapped out on them. So the heart, the liver, the kidneys, spleen, all of this pituitary pineal glands are mapped out on the genitals. And so every time you have sex, you're having this incredible acupressure treatment. And the hormonal flow that you get, like everything from oxytocin to serotonin, dopamine, all of these incredible feel-good, bliss hormones, endorphins that come out of pretty much every sexual experience. And the more that you try and aim to elevate them, and I have a terminology I use, junk food sex versus gourmet sex. And so elevated sex or gourmet sex would be the aim, where you're really bringing all parts of yourselves to the table. And so junk food, just like junk food that we eat, is, a quick hit, a bit of a high, and then a plummet, usually followed by feelings of remorse. And then a gourmet meal or gourmet sex is something where you put lots of love and attention and care into. You think about all of the different ingredients in it. And then it's this incredible multi-layered experience that usually lives with you for days. You might find yourself daydreaming about that meal or that sexual encounter because it was so incredible and powerful. And I remember I think early on, I had my first serious partner, and we'd gone away I often talk about sex dates and sex weekends, and we'd gone away for, I guess would have been the inaugural pioneering Anami sex weekend, to just gone away for the weekend, holed up in this cabin, and really just having sex all weekend. And I came back into the city and I was working, went back to my job, and this incredible thing happened. Like, I just had all of this poise and grace and confidence and flow. And then all of these men just started coming to my desk, right? Like coming to hang out with me and find excuses to talk to me. It's like I was radiating this quality that I didn't even know really about until then, that I knew was born out of all of these wild cataclysmic places that I had gone in myself and with my partner over that weekend, and came back. And now I was wearing and inhabiting that energy. And this is the phenomenon that I talk about, the wealth woman. And you can have wealth men as well, but then it really becomes this palpable energy that you radiate out into the world, and people can feel, right? And they can similarly feel when you're under and you're grouchy and frustrated, or really, sort of wallflower, introspective and not coming out into the world. And so I say that people, when they aren't in touch with their sexual energy and in the powerful gourmet sex way, are really operating at a deficiency.
So this is pretty much most of the population, yeah?
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know if you've done much research in this area, but what percentage of people do you think are actually having gourmet sex right now?
Under 1%.
Wow, massive. And the bridge is huge, right, for a lot of people. My thing is, I'm wondering for our listeners, how do we kind of create a conversation around bringing awareness to this? Okay, like bringing awareness to where are we at right now, what are the steps, and what are the first things that you need to look at to try and actually get to this state?
Well, a huge amount of what I do in my work is educating people about why to have sex. Because early on in the work that I did, I realized as I began working with couples that it wasn't that they needed more blowjob tips. It was that they needed to want to have sex. They wanted, a woman say needed to want to suck a cock, right? Like she needed to want to do that. And she could have 1,000 tips in her pocket, and that would make any shred of difference if she didn't want to do it. And so I realized that I had to really get to the root cause of why people weren't having sex, and then show them what's really possible. And so in my work, I have my Orgasmic Enlightenment podcast, my YouTube videos. It's so much information about why and what sex can really do for you. So I think that's the first step, is getting on board mentally to understand that there's so much that you don't know. Often people will ask me like, oh, so you're a sex therapist. I guess you work with people who are having trouble in their relationships. And I'm like, well, yes, sometimes, but really what I'm showing them to do is for women to learn how to have cervical orgasms, G-spot orgasms, to ejaculate across the room and shoot ping pong balls with their vaginas if they so desire. And for men to have sex for 8 hours at a time and learn how to separate orgasm from ejaculation, and to get massively high during sex, right? If you want to get high, have more sex. You don't even need the psychedelics. So, there's much more depth in what's available. And then I also like to use the analogy of, did you ever read that book, Born to Run by Christopher McDougall?
No, but I'm aware of it. Yeah.
So he really pioneered the whole barefoot, or brought out into the mainstream the idea of barefoot running. And in the book, he goes down to South America, actually it's Mexico, and he looks at this tribe who are meant to be the fastest long distance runners in the world. They do marathons, like on a Sunday afternoon, they'll decide to do a 2-day marathon for fun, just running through these canyons and jungle where they live. They strap some old tires onto their feet and they run. And so in the book, he does this whole like anthropological study about, because all these people who have these issues with running, right? It's like bad knees. Oh, I can't run. Running's really bad for you. And he found out that actually it's never, ever, ever been proven that running is bad for people. What actually causes all the injuries in people is running shoes. So I like to use that analogy to carry over into the sexual realm to say that all people have high libidos. All people are multi-orgasmic. All women can shoot ping pong balls across the room and have cervical orgasms. All men can have sex for 11 hours at a time and control their ejaculation however they want to. The only thing that's stopping us is that we have this conditioning, we have trauma that we've taken on, and beliefs that we've inhabited, right, or inherited. And so the work is to remove those things so that the innate, voraciousness that we all have, and it's the Anami guarantee. I guarantee that we all have it within us. It's just a matter of bringing it up to the surface and clearing away any debris / running shoes that have been layered on top to make it seem like maybe it isn't natural for certain people, right? Oh, just some people can do that. Oh, don't worry about that, little girl. You don't even bother trying to have an orgasm. It's okay. You're just one of those people who can't, but don't feel bad. Like, to me, that is the most, horrible use of this whole SJW, don't blame people, don't shame people, BS culture, where we're actually removing the potential of people and squashing that rather than showing them how they can achieve these things.
So it is coming down to self-responsibility, which is something that I talk a lot about with my clients, of going, well, if something's not working, it's an opportunity perhaps to go, why? What's beneath it? What's going on? Because it's just astounding the amount of women that don't orgasm.
In terms of women not orgasming, there's so much misinformation out there, right? Like, women are often told that there's only one orgasm. There's a clitoral orgasm, and they're there. It's fine if you don't have one. Well, there's not just a clitoral orgasm. There's many different types of orgasms. And I'm a really big proponent of women having deeper vaginal orgasms because they're much more profound and regenerative and life-changing. And once you have them, you don't go back to the clitoris. And you can have nipplegasms, assgasms, eargasms, full body orgasms. Like, there's about 9 or 10 different, orgasms that a woman can have. So there's a lot of wrong education that's out there. And then, like I said, there's this very patronizing attitude, like, oh, they're there, don't worry about it. Or even a disbelief, like, oh, G-spot orgasms don't exist. We proved it in a lab. Well, look, if you put me into a lab and tried to get me to have a G-spot orgasm on demand with a bunch of white coats and clipboards standing around me, I'm very orgasmic, and I doubt that I'd be able to achieve that in that situation, right? So there's this really idiotic lack of understanding around how these things even work, right? Like, would we try to prove love in a lab? Like, prove that you love me in a lab? Like, is it repeatable? So I'm all about women having these deeper orgasmic experiences because it's so important to them as people. Like I said, these are our self-actualizing mechanisms that we have access to, right? In terms of personal growth, like I say, all these great tools are available to us, meditation, and all the things that we can do in terms of diet and exercise and spirituality and health and sex is in that same toolbox.
Want to look deeper into your own health? Our virtual naturopathic team help people all over the world to shift their health and their lives. We offer a 90-minute online discovery and diagnostic session where you can find out where you're at, why things are happening, and what you need to do about it. Everyone is an individual, and sometimes it can help to have someone break down your journey and see where you need to head next. To find out more, go to theshiftclinic.com and click on Clinic. I want to talk a little bit more about orgasms. What is an orgasm? Can you just break it down? And I want to know more about it.
Well, I guess there's different definitions, and I don't even know what the Western definition of it is. But I guess in my framework, I would say that it's a type of energetic release that happens within the person and a physical release as well, and a full reset of the person. And so the French term for orgasm is le petit mort, the little death and rebirth. And this really fits my framework of sex and the purpose of orgasm, where it's like this shedding, this deep, deep, powerful release and a shedding of the things that we no longer need, and then an emergence of more of our authentic and true self. And this is particularly the case for cervical orgasms and G-spot orgasms to a lesser extent. And so that's why I'm always nudging people, like, the good stuff is in the vagina. The clitoris is literally the tip of the iceberg. Like, I would say 10% of the pleasure that a woman has available to her is in the clitoris, and 90% of it is in the vagina. And for women who, again, have been told that the clitoris is where it's at, and then they don't even pay much attention to their vaginas. Most women have numb vaginas through lack of exercise and really inhabiting them and internalizing energetic oppression. And so they just think of their vagina as a receptacle, right? Like, that's where their partner ejaculates to have pleasure. And it's something maybe that's okay for them, but not the best, because they don't know what they don't know about vaginal orgasms.
So what are some of the first steps that women can take to kind of access these parts of themselves? We talked about looking at trauma stuff, looking at the emotional side of it, but what would you suggest?
The first step is education. Once they get started, they're like, oh my gosh, this is what I intuitively thought, but never really saw articulated in the culture anywhere, right? Like, they intuitively felt that their sexuality was healthy and normal and not this weird thing they should be ashamed of, in the world. And I think that's a huge first step, is really educating yourself about what's possible so that you can reframe the ideas and beliefs that you may have absorbed over the decades. And then it's about removing blockages, is looking at things that might be acting as the running shoes, right? Things that are suppressing that natural expression of your sexuality. And so an example of that would be, say, the beliefs that your family, that your mother and father had around sexuality, how their sexual relationship was, and how that imprinted itself upon you. It's also in the culture at large. For women, the Madonna whore block is a really big one, right? Like, we grow up with this idea that women are either sluts or they're virgins, and there's really not this happy middle ground of being a voraciously healthy sexual woman, right? There's judgment. And so there's that to work through. And, the stats are extremely high for people who've suffered some kind of sexual abuse or trauma. And if that isn't properly healed, that will then have an effect sexually and physically on a person for the rest of their lives. And so these are three biggies that people have to really examine and then shift and heal. And this is the kind of work that I do in all of my salons, is showing people how to do that.
Are orgasms important for reproductive health?
Yes, I would say that having regular sex and orgasms just keeps everything flowing, right? Like, and as well as, I would intertwine this with using a jade egg for women, right? Where they're consciously learning how to activate and strengthen their vaginal walls and their pelvic floor. And so they have a much more engaged vagina when they're having sex. And so that's increasing lubrication and circulation. And so all of our sexual hormones can flow and move much better, because they're not sitting in this congested mass where they're stuck and stagnant. And overall, like I said, all of these hormonal benefits that we get, this upliftment and energizing and increase circulation of all these hormones in our bodies that are born out of every sexual encounter, particularly what I promote, which are extended sexual encounters and then frequent sex.
What would you describe an extended sexual encounter as?
Well, I recommend that people have at least a 3-hour sex date once a week, and then say a couple of shorter, like maybe half an hour or an hour encounters, again, like maybe another 2 times a week minimum. And the 3-hour sex date has become a real staple in my teachings, because this really gives you the chance to go deep. Like, the average man ejaculates in 3 minutes, right? 75% of men ejaculate in 3 minutes, and I think 90% within 5 minutes. So most people are massively under and sexually deprived. And if a woman, is having encounters like that, it's like pretty easy to see why she's like, I'm not really into sex that much. I'm not really into just being humped, dumped, and schlumped upon, and that's it. So all these hormonal benefits, they increase everything from our focus and concentration, even our cardiovascular output, to our sleep quality and our emotional balance. Like everything gets impacted.
So you're a vaginal weightlifter, which I think like a lot of people would find incredibly intriguing. I want to talk about the vagina, and you mentioned really briefly around using yoni eggs. Like, why is it important to have a healthy toned vagina?
Well, it's important for everything in sexual health. Like having a healthy and toned vagina increases everything from sensation and pleasure to orgasmic potential. It increases lubrication because, as I said earlier, when there's more circulation, there's more oxygenation and flow, and then there's more lubrication. So I've had women in their 60s and 70s who come along and they, didn't want to be taking hormones, and they dared to try using a jade egg, and they began lubricating again naturally without any kind of lubricant. So I believe that all women can lubricate naturally. They just, again, have to unlock why it is that they are not. So the jade egg also gives you the ability to make your partner ejaculate or not ejaculate with the power of your vagina alone. You can open a beer bottle with your vagina if you wanted to. Haha. It prevents and reverses urinary incontinence, and it prevents and in some cases reverses pelvic organ prolapse or POP. Now, the problem with, again, misinformation around vaginal strength is that women are often told to do their Kegel exercises. So Dr. Arnold Kegel was around in 1947. He invented this exercise because his women patients were having all kinds of issues with urinary incontinence. And so when he invented it, he used a device inside the vagina that was called the Kegel perineometer. And this was in order to provide resistance and feedback through the vagina. So just like when you want to lift weights, right? You don't just flap your arms and legs around in the air and think that you did a great workout. You actually lift weights so that you have enough resistance and feedback that you can build strength. You're challenging the muscle. Well, the vaginal muscles and the pelvic floor work the same way. And so when he began using this device and these exercises, his patients had a 90% success rate. And then over time, this exercise began to be adopted by other doctors, except that they removed the portion about using a device inside the vagina, and they just had women randomly flap their vaginas in the wind. And in so doing, they immediately dropped the success rate by 50% and tanking, right? And right now, the Yale University School of Medicine has found that over 60% of women have urinary incontinence issues, and 50% of women after childbirth have some form of pelvic organ prolapse. And so these statistics are insane, right? Like there's no reason for them. And this is where we have this concept that I refer to as the normalization of dysfunction, where women think it's normal to pee their pants, right? They think it's normal to have to go get surgery after having a baby to try to put their internal organs back into place. Well, none of that would have to happen if they were quite simply exercising and strengthening their vaginas properly, which is what we do with the jade egg.
So for people who are totally new to this, what is a jade egg?
So a jade egg is exactly how it sounds. It is a stone, a jade stone that's carved into the shape of an egg. It's got a hole drilled through it so that you can put string through it, and then you tie it. And then you put the egg up into the vaginal canal, and then the string comes down, and you can lift or hold, weight any number of objects to it. And people would generally start quite gently and slowly. I'm rather well known around the globe for lifting all kinds of exotic things, from Venetian chandeliers to green coconuts to a piece of the Berlin Wall at the Berlin Wall in Germany, which I now call the Great Wall of Vagina. So I was fairly well known for this Instagram campaign, #things I lift with my vagina, using the jade egg. And this was all in this effort to promote awareness about what vaginas can really do. right? This is again coming back to the idea that actually, no, the normal healthy baseline for all vaginas is truly to be able to shoot ping pong balls, right? Every vagina in its actual normal healthy state ought to have that degree of articulation and dexterity. What's not normal is women peeing their pants or their vaginas falling out or their uteruses falling out. That is not normal, but that's become normalized.
Insane, right? Because for most people, there's just no concept of that. And so with the jade egg, is there benefit using it without lifting objects, or would you say that that's sort of a really key part of it?
It's a key part of it. I mean, once you get better at it, you can be very dexterous at moving the egg up and down and flipping it around in your vagina. But initially, you need that weight. And you don't need a lot of weight. Like when I sell my egg kits, they have a few rose quartz stones in them. And so that's just so that you can get that feedback, right? Like, okay, well, how much do I have to hold on and engage these muscles in order to exert enough strength to hold this object in place or to move this object around? So it is a really key point. But for people who think about lifting chandeliers or coffee tables, don't worry. I'm not going to get you to do that. All you need to do is start with a few tiny little stones.
I want to ask your opinion on something, and this is something that I've observed a lot over the years in my clinical practice, and this is painful intercourse. So women who have pain with intercourse, unexplained pain, so they've had all the medical testing, no, physiological reason found for it. But the phenomenon is that it can happen and then suddenly they get a new partner and it doesn't happen anymore. Is this something that you've observed throughout your career?
Yes, it's absolutely a symptom. Like we said, listen to the body. The body doesn't lie. The body is giving you crucial, vital information all the time. And if your vagina is clamped, what I call vagina on lockdown, there's a reason for it. It doesn't want to have sex, or it doesn't want to have sex with that person, or it's mad at that person, or it needs healing. Like there might have been, often what I found with that specific condition is there's a history of sexual trauma, sexual abuse, or rape or assault, and it's never properly been healed or cleared in that person's system. And so the vagina is saying, nope, not bringing in any visitors until you heal me, right? And the woman is like trying to force it, or, goes to the doctor, what's wrong with me? And they don't ever ask those questions or even think there's any relationship there. So, the woman is lost until she finds me or someone who might think like that, to be like, oh, maybe there's a deeper issue here. And there always is. Right? There always is. So yes, it's for sure. It's a barometer. Your vagina and your orgasms are a barometer. If your vagina is not wet, let's ask why, right? Is there an emotional connection that's missing? Is there something physical that needs to happen? If the vagina has pain or frequent infections, it's giving you a message, right? It's blocking or saying no when you can't.
So I listened to a podcast of yours on conscious monogamy recently, and I sent it to my partner and I was like, this is us. Really kind of entering this really amazing kind of phase of our relationship. So I resonated a lot with it, but I would love you to tell me, what are your views on conscious monogamy? What does it mean?
Well, I've coined this term, or I believe I've coined this term, conscious monogamy. And I would say that 99.9% of people are not monogamous. They think they're monogamous, but they're really not. And so for most people, that means that they're just not having sex with other people. And that doesn't just mean like people, so they're like emotionally cheating on someone. I don't even like the word cheating, because it implies that there's just one person at fault in the relationship. But look, my views about what conscious monogamy is that it's this complete emotional opening and surrender, and complete sexual opening and surrender with your partner. And when you truly have that, and most people do not have that, most people have kind of a don't ask, don't tell, don't reveal too much, don't tell white lies, say what you think is going to make them happy, don't really express your full truth. And to me, that's just a shitty relationship. So when people say things like, well, monogamy doesn't work, no, you just have a shitty relationship, and that's why it doesn't work. If you actually had a relationship that was vested with radical honesty, openness, you prioritize your sex lives, you realize that sex is your turbo boost superpower as a couple, and you put lots of time and energy into the evolution of yourselves and your relationship, then you have a conscious monogamy relationship. And that is an amazing relationship. And people in that kind of relationship aren't interested in having sex with other people. And almost all the time when people are interested in exploring polyamory, and it's a bit different now because it's really trendy, but for the most part, it's because there's some kind of block. They get to some kind of plateau in their relationship. And so instead of digging deeper and trying to explore, what is that? Why are we stuck? Why aren't we able to go further than we are right now? Is then they go, oh, I guess, humans weren't really meant to be monogamous, so we'll have sex with other people. And inevitably, when I scratch the surface of people who've gone this route, there is always, without exception thus far, I might be wrong sometime in the future, there's some kind of blockage that they weren't able to overcome. And then they default to this polyamory dynamic. But like I said, when people are really getting to that depth, they don't tend to crave being with other people.
Gut health is central to everything, so it may be good to get some additional support. Many of my listeners have opted to do my 8-week Heal Your Gut program. In this 8-week course, I'll take you through the strategies that I use with my patients in clinic every day to heal the gut and give you the lifelong tools you need to support your gut health. To join us, go to theshiftclinic.com and click on Programs and Courses. So what do you do if you're in a situation, and I guess you've probably had this a bit, where people are listening to your podcast, they're getting the stuff and they're like, I want this for myself, but the partner doesn't want to come to the party or is really difficult to get them to understand or do that. What's your advice for people on that?
Well, I have a great podcast episode on that called When One Person Wants to Grow. And the gist of it is that when you're in a situation like that, you invite your partner with love, instead of frustration, try to and give them a loving invitation to what it is you want to grow and explore it with. And if they say no, then you pull your energy back into yourself and you focus on you. You focus on your growth and your change and your evolution and do your own personal work. And then often what happens is that the partner feels there's this removal of that pressure that was on them before, and they are intrigued. They start to see differences in you, and that's attractive. They start moving towards you to be like, what's going on over here? And often they come on board. And if they really don't, then by the time you've done a certain amount of your own personal work, you'll have developed a new perspective and a level of confidence that will give you the ability to choose what you need to do in that situation, and also give you the strength if you then decide that you need to leave.
That's exactly the same advice that we give people as well in regards to just health changes. When someone's growing and they're wanting to do new things, it can be really difficult to do it on your own, but you do just have to go inwards, and focus on yourself. And then, as you said, if the person comes around, they come around, and if not, then, there's different pathways they can take. So I think that's actually really good advice. What's been the biggest shift that's occurred in your life?
Well, probably in terms of my own growth, fully occupying my own sexual energy. And even though I was aware of it, and like I said, probably more in tune with it than the average person from a younger age, there became a really pivotal point where I really did some deep, deep, deep exploration, excavation, and, came into myself in a whole new way, really inhabited that energy in a way that was, and one of the things that I talk about when especially women inhabit their sexual energy and become a well woman, one of the hallmarks of that time and is that they begin not to give a what anyone thinks about them. And I really came into that, and I think that energy is something that permeates everything that I do in my work, in my life, in my brand. And that's the most fun place to live ever, right? It's somebody, I was having a conversation yesterday with someone who was kind of going through that as a younger person, right? And I thought, oh yeah, right? And then having crossed that threshold where you truly don't give a shit, and then you become a catalyst for change. And it's just so much more fun to live your life when you don't give a shit what anybody else thinks about you.
And I fully see that and feel that through everything you do. And I think that's one of the things I love the most about you, is that a lot of the stuff you have completely pushes the norm and the what most people would perceive as being okay, but it needs to happen. This shift needs to occur. Is there a story that comes to mind of someone that you've worked with that's changed their life as a result of improving their relationship with their sexuality and implementing this for themselves?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories is a woman who came to me. So back at the beginning of my work, I did a combination of life coaching and intimacy coaching and even some business coaching. And she came to me for kind of a bit of life, maybe some business coaching. She was at a place where she didn't like her job. She was working for some kind of government agency in this 9-to-5 job, and she felt really stilted and she wanted to change. And so I was like, all right, well, tell me. And she's like, well, I don't really need much advice on the intimacy stuff. I feel I'm single, but I'm okay with that. And I said, well, all right. So after we, met once or twice, I said, look, I want you to now take on this home play where I want you to self-pleasure every day. I want you to go home. I want you to go yourself, basically. And so we talked a little bit about things she might like to do as careers, but we didn't do anything like career assessments or questionnaires or anything formal like that. And so she took this on for 3 weeks. And even throughout that period, there would be these really significant shifts in her where she was like going out and buying new clothes or new dresses or going out in these nature walks and just feeling different. And about 5 or 6 weeks into it, she just out of the blue, we didn't even work through this. She quit her job and decided that she was going to go do this yoga teacher training in Thailand and just whatever. And it was like, what happened was what we did was we revved up her sexual energy, right? So by her, and I have a specific process for this that I teach people called meditate, masturbate, create, where you're learning how to really breathe and harvest your sexual energy so that you can use it as a creative source in your life. And that's exactly what she did. And then of its own accord, this energy then guided her and propelled her into a whole new life and future, right? Her life force energy that she had been cut off from, or perhaps never even truly understood how to use in its highest way. And then she did. And this is what happened. And this is an example of the kinds of changes that I see happen in people, that once they get in touch with their sexual energy, it becomes a guiding force. Like it then moves them. Right? It pushes them forward in their lives as this incredible source of power. And this is exactly what I talked about at the beginning of this podcast or this interview, is that this is this life force energy that we all have access to. We just normally people don't know really how to access it properly, right? And so that is what my work is all about, is teaching people how to do this. So I often joke that I'm the best career counselor ever, because I just tell my clients to go themselves and then they get these great results.
Oh, I love it. Okay, last question. If you could give just one piece of advice for someone who wanted to make a shift in their life, what would it be?
Go yourself. Go yourself every day for the next 30 days. I have a couple of great videos on my YouTube channel. One is called Self-Pleasure 101, and it goes through that meditate, masturbate, create sequence. Do a 30-day challenge on yourself. There's also another video, I think, on a 30-day sex challenge. And then get a jade egg if you're a female, because I sell them in a mini class on my Anami Alchemia website in my vaginal kung fu salon. It runs every January, February, March, because that will also change your life from the inside out. So both having regular conscious sex with yourself or with your partner, if you have one, and if you are a woman, is getting a jade egg to further deepen that know thyself process.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Kim?
Like I said, I think the best place to start is really educating yourself about what's possible. So like I said, I've got a ton of podcast episodes out there, my Orgasmic Enlightenment podcast, my YouTube channel. And then if you want to take things further, I run what I call sexual savant salons, these online holistic sex education classes. And I've got one for everyone. There's vaginal kung fu, how to be a woman, Sexual Mastery for Men, Coming Together for Couples, and Sexy Mama, which is a holistic pregnancy and orgasmic birth class. But like I said, there's plenty of free info that I have out there that you can have access to, and you'll just start to open up your mind and your body to what's possible.
Thank you so much for joining me on The Shift, Kim. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks for having me.
Whoa, there was so much information in this episode. Let's review some of the key points and what action you could take as a result of this. Sex can be seen as a revitalization tool. It has been used for healing in many cultures and is an important part of our identity. It can be used as an avenue to our creativity and spirituality. There are many different types of orgasms, and according to Kim Anami, every woman has the potential to experience them. Based on what I have seen and patients that I've seen do her courses, I tend to agree with this. A lot of it has to do with us being able to break down the taboos and barriers to our own sexuality and finding a safe space where we can explore and open. If this seems impossible for you, there isn't anything wrong with you. It's just to realise there are bigger possibilities out there if you're willing to explore and heal. I don't think there's another area of health for women that has so much shame and secrecy injected into it than our sexual health. One of the things we need to work on is identifying and releasing trauma, shame, and beliefs about our sexuality that have imprinted on us over time. This can take some time and support, and I'd highly recommend seeking out a sex therapist or emotional wellness professional that can support you through this. Learning is great, but action is better. Here are a few things that you could do as a result of this conversation in order to shift your health and your life. Now, there is a Pandora's box of advice that I could give you to explore some of the things in this episode, but what I will say is that exploration is the key. Kim mentions using a jade egg for toning. This is something that has been used for thousands of years, and I think it's worth looking into. Kim offers a heap of courses: Vaginal Kung Fu, the Coming Together Salon, and Supercock, to name a few. These are great resources to learn some skills to broaden your sexual horizons and learn more about yourself. The biggest piece of advice I can give you is knowing that you are entitled to amazing sexual health, and to keep searching and seeking answers if you're feeling that something is missing or it could be better for you. Neglected sexuality leads to all kinds of issues for women, and it can rob you of your power, drive, and creativity. Not respecting the impact of sexual encounters or having the wrong type of energy here can do the same. I'll leave that for you to ponder. A huge thank you to Kim Anami for sharing her passion with us on The Shift. You can learn more about Kim and check out her online programs at kimanami.com. That's KIMANAMI.com. She also has an excellent podcast called Orgasmic Enlightenment and a very active Instagram presence also found at Kim Anami. If you like this episode, please let us know by sharing on social media and tagging myself and Kim so we can hear what you have to say. Or you can leave a comment on Spotify or a review on Apple Podcasts. In our next expert series on The Shift, we have Dr. Kulreet Chowdhury. She's an integrative neurologist with combined expertise in Ayurveda, and her insights and stories are so fascinating that you don't want to miss it.
Coming up on The Shift.
When we look at the Siddha records, they describe sound as a therapeutic modality from a quantum level. It's really important for people to understand that modern medicine uses sound. Here we have these absolutely extraordinary records. And the first time I saw them, I was just shocked because here they are on such fragile paper, and they just contain some of the most astounding information about the universe.
This series is a production of The Shift Clinic. Hosted by Katherine Maslin. Music and sound design by Shade Furlong. Thank you to all of our experts. For more details on them, go to theshiftclinic.com.
We can be. We must be.
The first generation to end extreme poverty.
The generation most determined to fight injustice
and inequality.
The generation that saves the planet
from climate change.
And this is how we will get it done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan for everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
The global goals are a framework that collectively help us
support the health of our people
and the planet.
At Shift, we are ambassadors for the global goals.
This project supports global goal number 6.
Clean water and sanitation.
Every time you listen
to an episode of The Shift,
we provide a day's access to clean water
for a human in need
in Malawi, Africa.
Water is the foundation to health, and we believe
every human should have access
to clean, healthy water.
So please share this podcast wide
and keep tuning in
so we can impact those who need it the most.